thought I'll just start with a small introduction. Um, so a lot of the conversations, interactions I've had with Gautamana have been centered around our general studies classes back in school. So the general studies session was a platform that aimed at helping us to think through events happening around us. So we would always start it off by reading various articles in the newspaper, and the discussions that Gautamana facilitated through them were intended to help us articulate our views based on evidence, listen to other people's views carefully, and engage with alternative perspectives in a respectful manner. I personally felt that GS classes really helped me to be less judgmental and more open to listening and learning about different perspectives that may not have always aligned with mine. And it was also in some of the smaller things of being very aware that what we presented were individual perspectives. And while they would definitely vary from person to person, they were always acknowledged as being real to them. So, in a lot of the conversations that we had, we were always encouraged to speak from a personal space of, I think, or according to me, and in my experience. And that really allowed us to take a stand as individuals while opening out and being receptive of others within a collective. And to me, that was very empowering as a person who wasn't always open to sharing my thoughts or my point of view, and it's still something that I take with me whenever I engage with different people. So this is like one of the probably like the memory that I have of interactions with Gautamana. So Anna, it's over to you.
Thank you so much, Meera. Thank you for this opportunity of inviting me to Cuckoo conversations and for thinking of a person who's been mainly in education to share some thoughts. I see from the list of participants, I have colleagues, former colleagues, I have present students, I have older students, I have people with whom I've had relationship over multiple years, and some who are very new. There's some I don't recognize some names. You all for joining this conversation. And I thought this is a leisurely space of conversation. I thought first I'd share a little bit Cuckoo conversations are so meaningful to me. And then maybe we'll open it out. And conversations, as I have understood, is to find people who've had some experience, people who have managed to do something or gain some experience in their lives, and find a platform where this can be meaningfully shared with the younger generation. But I also feel that age is hardly a barrier in conversation. And I think this is something very, very important. So I'm going to share a few screens so that you have something to look at as well. And I will share this with you in a couple of minutes. Yeah. Entire screen. Share. Okay. So, I've felt that life is a design opportunity. So maybe broadly you can say that's the theme of the conversation today that I will initiate. Me and everyone else, that is that so? Or is that something that we are assuming to be, or based on what you're saying? So, there was a visitor who came to school and many visitors ask various questions about school. This visitor, while we were having lunch, I think he must have seen enough children around the school. He said, "What's the strength of the school?" I think you're trying to get hold of some numbers, some sense of scale. It sounded like a tourist asking how tall is the Qutub Minar or what is Mahabalipuram or do you know where I can buy uh, something I need. How many students have gone to foreign universities or gone to important, recognized colleges and were working in well-known companies.
Gautamana, sorry, you're coming in a little broken.
Oh, that's so?
Yeah. We're missing a couple of words here and there, so.
Okay, just give me a second. I think I don't know what the reason is. Because very, very weird. And I'm not sure why this is so. Coverage is like that. Just one second. I'll try and closer to the internet. Is that clearer now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I have asked such questions. I'm not trying to distance myself from people who ask such questions, but I have myself asked such questions. When you feel you're a stranger and you want to get you ask, and by asking such questions, you begin to kind of understand how things are, what's the lie of the land. I don't know what happened to me that day when the question was posed, what's the strength of the school? I said conversation. Breaking anything into numbers is easy. A bit like knowing the name of an insect or a bird or an animal. It doesn't tell us very much of value. It doesn't tell us things which are of value. And this person was quite flabbergasted. He didn't ask me, "No, what do you mean by that?" If he had, I would have given him different kind of answers. He persisted, saying, No. I want to know how many students you have. And I said, well, that's another matter altogether. If he had asked conversation, what do you mean? I might have said, in this school, we have many conversations among adults and among teachers. We try to think together and ask questions, listen to each other. It's not easy, but we persist. And that, I think, is the most valuable. That is most valuable. And I think that's our strength. I would have said that. But this second part never came up. We could ask today also, what's a conversation? Is it people talking together like we are hoping, I'm hoping that we will do today, and I hope you are also joining in this. It's not speaking, listening. Is it not just passing of ideas, getting ideas from others? Is listening not an extractive process? You want to extract something from listening to another. And is speaking not giving something? We do speak, we do hear, but do we listen? And what does that mean? I have pursued such questions, invited others to join in and ask such questions, understand such questions, young and old. I've had the fortune of my work needing me to question, to invite others to question, to work together with others, and if possible, go beyond what Mira so beautifully put, saying it was very empowering for her to enter these conversations, to find that there were people who were listening, there was an atmosphere of respect. I was very fortunate that in my work life in school, that this was my job, this was my work. So that's why Cuckoo conversations is almost irresistible to me. But I must begin with a story. When I was about 11 or 12, I came to Chennai to study in a school. My father had asked me to stay with my uncle, who used to be the headmaster of the best theosophical school. And I used to visit an aunt who was nearby in Gandhinagar. I used to visit her Her name was Saraswati. She's no more. She passed away a couple of years ago. And she would always have time to sit and listen and talk and ask very big questions, which I was not used to anybody asking me these questions. And once a week or once in 2 weeks or sometimes even, if it was not more frequently, we would have these conversations which would go on. She would not box me into a corner in the conversation so that I had to take a position with a yes or a no. But neither would she shy away from asking some difficult questions about society, about family, about people, about the old and the young. And this was an extraordinarily respectful space that I had the good fortune of sampling as a very young boy. And to me, it seems that there's a connection between that space, which I managed to have at that age, and the rest of whatever I've done in my life in some sense. So, we could go on in this way and I could share more things. But I thought in the nature of a conversation, opening out a conversation, maybe doing it slightly differently. If any of you have a question which you would like to ask me on the basis of what I've said or on the basis of um, um, what you have read or anything, you could ask and we could go into it together.
So I'm getting a couple of questions from different sources, Anna.
Yeah.
One second, let me just go through them. How does one create the space to hold another person's opinion, and what kind of a space should it be?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to do some more screen sharing because in some sense I had something like this. I thought through something like this a little bit.
Okay.
It's not all endeavor, the asking of questions, trying to find answers, responses, more questions. It's not the coronavirus posing us questions. And don't we want urgently an answer? And is not this conversation also one of the responses to one such question? For me, conversations are a very sacred space where we invite each other to listen, to speak, where we have space for difficult perceptions and voices, where we are vulnerable, where we are moved by the voices of others, to find fresh locations, to move our positions, to change and move and shift and discover that understanding deeply shifts one inside. So I find one of the big blocks in conversation is that somehow it starts with an expectation that we will be understood the way we want to, way we understand ourselves. So one thing that I learned or I could articulate at the end of the 21st century, I think, about the time when the general studies classes started with, was that we understand each other partially. It doesn't matter what one says, how beautifully one presents it, how accurately one puts the words. We really don't understand each other fully. We have to accept this somewhere that our understanding, whatever it is inaccurate and incomplete. So, this is one very big first step. So, if my understanding is inaccurate and incomplete, then when I speak, can I give you, all the people who are listening now, permission to understand what I'm saying in ways different from in the way I would like to be understood. Can we say to each other, speak and you will be incompletely and wrongly understood, but please speak nevertheless? Can we say that? It's like saying, look, agreement matters less than the fact that we listen to each other. And maybe we can build on it. We can give evidence of having listened. Maybe together we can construct something. We can co-construct something. I think we have to move away, Meera, in what you asked, in the question that you asked. I think we need to move away from the fact that uh, we need to move away from the fundamental that talking, conversation, listening is all about extracting information from each other, getting something, hanging on, taking something from you and making it my own. Is there too much wind here? In that case, maybe I'll shift my location. I don't know if it's hindering your listen.
I think it's coming in clear. Your voice seems a little distant, so doesn't seem loud enough
Oh, okay. Do you think I
at
should be
different
close?
points. Yeah.
Or maybe around as well? It's joining the conversation. It's not a cuckoo, but it's joining the conversation. So I don't know. I'd say that is the fundamental. If I want to listen to somebody and somebody is saying something, I don't understand fully what they're saying. Will I hang and listen, knowing that my understanding is partial? So that much I can say as an answer to that question.
Okay. Related to that, why do you think it's so rare to find conversations that are not merely functional?
Hmm. See, one of the things I have discovered, if I don't know what you're saying, and why would I, why do we engage in conversation? Why do we talk to each other? And what I have learned through conversations along with the young, particularly, and with their very honest, candid, brave articulation, is that usually conversations have a purpose. And the purpose is I want to get somewhere. I want to get this from you. And in exchange, I'm willing to provide A, B, C. I think to enter into a conversation as two human beings, as Krishnamurthi used to say, two friends sitting on a bench, um, there is no agenda. There is no getting somewhere. There is looking at things and trying to understand what the world is speaking to us in multiple ways. And we, as human beings who are gathering some things, who have some understanding, who have pieced together some things, are sharing it with each other as friends. And in the process, maybe traveling together sometimes, maybe questioning each other sometimes, maybe sometimes stumbling upon a way of looking at things which we had never seen before. It's being ready for discovering the unknown. It's not a process of extraction. It's not a process of getting something. And I think this question that Deepthi is asking about why is very rare to find. Um, we go to another fundamental that we find in Krishnamurti's words in many places. But he says in his talks, he would say, I'm not your teacher. I'm not here to convince you of anything. You see, the world today is a very strange place. We are busy convincing each other of things. We want to market things. We want to sell things. We want to make our ideas stand in front of other ideas. So there's always an agenda. There's always an agenda. Uh, I'm not saying what I'm saying. Saying this is, as you very rightly put me, rather. I'm not saying, look, this is how I think about it. We don't draw courage from what Krishnamurthi said. He said, these are the teachings, tear it to bits, he said. I mean, who had the courage to say this? But we don't have the courage to say, look, this is my viewpoint. I know it may not be the best, but please go on, tear it to bits. Let's talk about it together. I'm not so fragile that if you say, look, I think I don't agree with you on this, or whatever, that trip will stop, or that I will stop listening to you, or I will be looking for revenge to pay back the next time you open your mouth. So I think there are many layers in this. Do we really dare being open, vulnerable, simple, humble with each other? Yeah? Do
Yes.
you want me to say something more? Layer to the question? Go ahead.
Go on, Anna. Definitely.
No, I think as far as that question is concerned, I think I've said.
Okay. So related to that question about daring to be who they are, as they are. So how do we encourage children to be who they are, as they are, even in an otherwise conventional system of education? What are some of the seemingly smaller steps that we can take as educators from within the existing paradigms of education that may not allow for this freedom of expression?
Can you imagine the tragedy of humankind, which after so many millennia, that we are not able to grasp this simple fact as a fundamental, that the other view is as relevant, as valid as your own view. And therefore, we can't create dignity in our relationships. Our relationships are manipulative, they are extractive. You know, one of the things I discovered as a process in the school, and we have applied it vastly in Paathshaala, was the proposal sheet. I realized that whenever people made proposals, they would only talk about all the advantages of their idea. Whenever people had a proposal, it would be full of all the good things. Only after you started talking about asking questions, because all your anxieties were beginning to express themselves, and you started asking about questions, that you would discover that there is no proposal in this world without some shortcomings. Nothing. So I played with this and I said, can we not? We are all friends, we are all working together. When we put down proposals, can we ourselves not say what are all the limitations we see? For instance, if you ask me what is the value of your sitting outside, I say, one, you have the blue sky and the trees, which is really beautiful, and the voice of the cuckoo. There is a disadvantage. The wind may make the sound a little bit worse. There's another disadvantage. I'm sitting in an unfamiliar place, and therefore occasionally I might grow. If we are really friends and you and I are sharing a place, a family, a home, a workplace, colleagues, or just two friends discussing something, why would we not? And I have a viewpoint. Why would I not share what I see with the other person? So we started doing this with our proposal sheets. And it was quite revolutionary, I would say, because what we saw and what we learned, all of us together, was something quite remarkable. That when you put down pros and cons of something, your colleague will add to the pros in ways in which you had never fathomed. Other colleagues will add to the cons in ways in which you never thought. And shared ownership is possible. And this is quite remarkable. That it's possible for people to go counter to our own conditioning, our own fears, and somehow co-construct, somehow escape this fate of trying to guard our perceptions as more sacred. When Kabir says, you have to trick yourself. So I think good processes are those which manage to trick ourselves a little bit, at least, in putting aside our self-interest, our self-centered way of functioning, and creates a little space where something different can happen.
So there's a question. I used to think that the things I'm entitled with, especially all of my worldly, actually gave me the space and freedom to focus solely on making a positive difference. But I realized that they were, in fact, the very things that isolated me from the truth. But does that mean that I have to give it all up?
Oh, is that Mira? Mira, you spoke just now?
Yes, yes. I'm just reading out a question that I got.
Got a question, okay. I had this most wonderful conversation. Okay, there is somebody else, Vishnath, my friend, is saying that the cuckoo is too loud. So, will you just give me 5 seconds? I'll just change my location and we'll be fine. I'll just switch off my video and join you in 5 seconds.
Sure. Okay.
Okay. Is that better, please? In many ways,
Yes, you're a lot clearer.
much clearer, and the voice is better, and the video is better. Okay, very good. Thank you. So, we have advantages, disadvantages. We have lost the cuckoo, we have lost the coil, and we have lost the mute. Okay, so I one of the vacations, the children came back from. Every term children return to school. It happened in the school. It happened in Paathshaala, and there was a fantastic conversation I had with this young lady, with a group of young people. I don't know if they are here today or not, but she made a very remarkable comment, because I was asking these kids, saying, "Look, Paathshaala is an austere place. You get the same food. You don't have choice about what you eat. You don't have choice about the schedule. You don't have choice about the dry toilets. You don't have, gadgets. And you have other things to do. You have rota, you have cleaning, you're part of many things. And why would you give up personal space? Why would you give up the space where you don't have to clean your toilets, you don't have to look after your house, you don't have to cook, you don't have to clean dishes, and you have all the gadgets at your disposal? You can order whatever food you want through Swiggy or whichever one you prefer, Zomato or whoever is working at that time, or go to whichever restaurant you want, sleep whenever you want, wake up. Why would you give all this up and come to this place which is so austere? You have the same check bed sheets that everybody has. You have the same food that everybody has. You can't waste food. You can't say, I like this, I don't like that. What do you come here for? So there were some very interesting answers that some people gave. One person said, I think I have a sense of space here. I feel I'm not being pushed along here or there. Somebody else said, I find that I'm in my house also. I have very nice parents, but I feel there is a direction. There is some kind of pressure. They want me to think something along with them in their direction. Somebody else spoke about the open spaces, the sky. And this young lady said, what you say is right, Anna. I definitely have everything that you say. I have all the privileges.
It's 17:30.
And With that, what grows is a sense of entitlement. I feel very entitled, and I guard my entitlement. I've never forgotten the words. Nobody could have put it so nicely. Then she said, "Here you have none of those things. You don't have to guard anything. You're just like everybody else." And she said, there is space for the real questions of life. So I wonder if more is not really conducive to inquiring life, to thinking about things deeply, to trying to understand what life is all about. Whether austerity, Krishnamurthi did use the word austerity. Well, do we have to have all the comforts? Do comforts and all the things, additional things that we need. I see a question here about the corona and what's going to happen to you after um, education after corona. Much of whatever we took for granted has been stripped off. We'll have to discover what that means. We can go into that question a little later. I'm just connecting that to this. The things that we have got used to, things that we consider comfortable, are ephemeral. They are there because everybody else agrees that these are comforts and you need them. Everybody needs that you need brown toast in the morning. Therefore, we all begin to believe that we need brown toast in the morning. That becomes our, you know, fundamental on which we base our life. Suddenly, no toast comes. There is no bread, no toast. And then somebody like Marie Antoinette has to say, why if you don't have bread, eat cakes. He left in a rather strange world. Did we need somebody to, did bread need to disappear for us to know that bread, ragi, tair sadam, upma, 100 things can constitute breakfast, just a fruit. Or one day you miss your breakfast, nothing is going to happen to you in your life. But it runs on 3 days in a row and then it becomes a ritual, a sacred ritual. Yes, please.
There's a question about um, why do we not like to make mistakes? Why are we so hesitant to allow ourselves to make a mistake?
Yeah, we are afraid to make mistakes. We are afraid to play with things. None of us learned how to walk without falling down 100 times or 1,000 times. None of us learned to cycle without injuring our shins. Some of us did, I think. Some of us managed it pretty well. But most of us, we don't manage to do that. Now, you want to try something new. Um, we are on Zoho today. I have never been on Zoho before except with Meta a couple of times. Zoom is my stable environment till now, and maybe a little bit occasionally on Skype. So there may be some errors. So, is it more? Are we worried about what people will think of us, or are we worried about how we will look to others, or how will I look to myself even? So there are two aspects to this question about why we are afraid to make mistakes. I think on the one hand, we have grown up with a notion of perfectionism. We have grown up thinking that we are absolutely the perfect people. We don't need to kind of make mistakes, and we can. We have to kind of go ahead and we have to be perfect because if I make mistake, I can't bear it if I make mistakes. But there is a new phenomenon, and I think many of us are aware of it. We are seeking endorsements. We are looking for external validation all the time. I can't speak my mind because I'm scared what will happen if I get a thumbs down. So I don't speak my mind. I try to be politically correct. I try to be middle of the road. I don't attempt a problem because I may fail, or somebody else will laugh at me, or somebody will ridicule me. But I think an enhanced sense of fragility is part of the reason for where we are today. And this is not a small matter; it's a big matter. I think our fragility is compounded by many factors. One is that I think the way people talk to each other, if we listen to each other carefully, we do not let the other person see exactly what we think, because we want to monitor how that person's response. If I were to say something to my friend, that person will say, "No, I never knew you are capable of this kind of thinking." I don't want to look like that to somebody who I call a friend, whose opinion I value. Therefore, I don't say what I want to say, or I keep quiet, or I water it down and say it in some manner. I don't trust that friendship is built on actually knowing what the other person thinks and actually being able to listen to it without kind of breaking down or throwing the other person out. So it comes back to this question of where are our fundamentals? Are we clear that we don't understand things very well? We have opinions, just like everybody else. If we start there, then maybe, yes, if we make some mistake, you fall down from the cycle, it's all right. You try something, it doesn't work, it's all right. Who said everything has to work the first time? But are we willing to try? In fact, Krishnamurti was very remarkable in his comment on that. He said, this kind of education has never been attempted. He said, are you willing to give your life to it? We don't know if it's possible, he said. So he was inviting people to a journey with great honesty, great simplicity, great beauty.
So, related to this whole thing of being afraid to make mistakes, mm, in a system where we're given the freedom to create our own paths, is it still possible to lose one's way? And what is it that you think that brings us back?
Is it possible to lose our way? See, I've been a heretic in this business. From 2000 onwards, I've been telling senior students, look, by the time you go to college and come out, you will be regretting having lost 3, 4 years of your best 3, 4 best years of your life, riding the yellow bus or sitting in some lecture hall and listening to uninspiring people, all because you need a degree. I think the tide is turning, and there are multiple ways of certifying oneself, multiple ways of acquiring knowledge. But I think the skills that one needs is openness, good cheer, ability to live with very little. When you need very little, as young people, one pie on the floor and few books. If that's all you need, then you are very rich, because you don't need much to sustain your life. Food will always come to you. I think it's the fripperies which make us lose our way. When we begin to measure our location in society with the money in the bank or money that somebody else is earning because of a certain degree, then we tend to lose our way. And I think in trying something which you feel like trying, you feel like going after something. I'll give you an example from my own life. You see, when I was in college, uh, in IIT, and from the books, I would go to the library like everybody else went to the library. I picked up a book on crystallography from the shelf one day. It was W.H. and W.L. Bragg. It was fascinating to me to read about crystals and how crystals could be, how the structure of metals and compounds could be seen through diffraction, interference, and everything else. And I was fascinated with it. I never knew anything about it at that time. I must have been 18 or something. And I pursued this as a parallel interest right through my college years. And I wanted to work in something called field ion microscopy. I was hell bent on going in that direction. My path was set. I was decided that I'm going to work with the field ion microscope. I even wrote to a professor in Palar Centre University, a very eminent gentleman, and said, I would like to come and work with you. Please give me drawings. I'll make one here in IIT, everything. But my college decided otherwise. They did not let me do the work with the field on microscope or have anything to do with it. They gave me something called bending creep. It sounds terrible, but that's what they asked me to do. But I was heartbroken. So should one pursue something and find that it's not working? I went to BARC thinking that I would work with the field on microscope because they had one field on microscope. And there again, they did not let me work with the field on microscope. They allocated me to something called radiometallurgy. So yeah, I'm pursuing a dream, and the world every time is diverting me in some other direction. Is it a wrong thing? So, do we want to say, look, this is what I want, and not be blown if it doesn't work? I don't think I have any the lesser because I did not work with the field on microscope. Looking back, the dots connected very well. Other things happened. I learned how to play the sitar. I learned how to walk long distances in the streets of Bombay. So all kinds of other things happened. But do we dare give ourselves wholeheartedly to some pursuit? Or do we want to make sure that the end result is available only then we'll pursue? In that sense, we don't have a guarantee. So I would feel the loss of path is when people don't dare to pursue something. They've been beaten into submission saying, follow the beaten track. That's where the loss is. I think it's a terrible loss. I think it's a horrible thing our society does to young people to fix them onto comfort and fix them onto a direction. Who knows what tomorrow holds? I think we have little else other than our spirits. Now, how do we nourish the spirit of a young person is a big question. And I think the pursuit of something which catches your fancy, something that you really want to pursue, something you want to do, you're willing to do for hours and hours and hours. I spent hours and hours on the field on microscope because they didn't let me work with it. I did computer simulation with it, but I spent hours and hours and hours with it. And anything that you spend hours and hours and hours with teaches you something. That's it. So life is a journey of learning. Life is an adventure. Sometimes you get the things you want, sometimes you don't. Most often not. It hardly matters. So I think keeping this spirit alive is the big question. And I think this spirit is the only thing that matters in a human being. And for me, the way I would nourish the spirit in any young person is to explicitly and non-verbally say to this person, because I deeply believe it, that's where I stand, that what that person does is not terribly important to me. Who the person is far more significant to me rather than what the person has, how many crores of rupees the family has, and what businesses they are invested in. That was secondary stuff, or what clothes even the person is wearing. It's secondary stuff. I mean, it doesn't matter if the person is not smelling of the latest deodorant. Who cares? It doesn't matter if the person is not shaven or if the hair is out of place. Of course, in school, I insist with kids, hey, listen, don't let your hair fly all over the place. But if I meet a human being, that's hardly relevant. If it was, in Paathshaala one day, one very strange thing happened. There was an old man who had some ducks and he came and he was sitting and talking. And as we spoke to him, we found there was an extraordinary tragedy he had been through in his life. His only daughter, for some reason, had a burn injury. This man was minding the ducks and he was talking so sweetly and gently to all of us. And if we had not engaged with him, we would never have known what his life was all about. He was a poor man. But he found enough dignified space in our conversation to share with us and to talk about himself, and we could listen to him. So life is full of stories. Stories of the human spirit, stories of endurance, stories of how people handle with great dignity the sorrows that they feel. So, I mean, somewhere allowing this alertness, alert uh, energy, and this is the spirit that I think a young person needs far more than the things that the world can offer. I don't know if I've connected to the question in the right way, but this is how it emerged for me.
So often we have a very particular learning environment in mind for children, but then we're not satisfied by what others like schools or institutions have to offer. And that ultimately means we have to create it for ourselves. But how do we do that?
Can you say it one more time, please? I missed some part of the question. One more time.
Yes. Often we have a very particular learning environment in mind for our children, but we're not satisfied by what others, as in schools or other institutions, have to offer. And that means we have to create it ourselves. But how do we do that?
If I go back to my proposal, every environment is flawed. Every environment has some advantages. And uh, if education was to happen only in certain privileged environments or certain kinds of environment, um, then I think we can't call it an education. I think education happens in multiple ways, multiple contexts. But your question is about how our mind always seeks improvement. We are not satisfied with whatever we have. And that I think is a very deep disease. And it's a disease. It's a disease of becoming. It's a disease where we are not satisfied with whatever we have, which also is a parallel disease. There are two sides of the same coin. I simply don't know how to value what I have. I simply don't know how to value what I have. Because this is a tricky question. I have, I watched a very beautiful video this morning. It was about a young man who was talking about, who goes around asking people what are the lessons they have learned from life, because the lessons are not only learned in school. And it was very poignant that he asked people, he asked his mother, and he asked even Shah Rukh Khan, who was comparing the program. It was quite amazing. Somebody called Deepak Ramola. Uh, that are we open to the lessons that life is throwing up at all times? Or are we becoming? I use another metaphor, which is a metaphor, environmental metaphor. You know, you have creatures which graze in certain terrain. For instance, there are savanna buffaloes. Then you have the Nilgiri tar, which only lives and grazes in the high ranges. Are we creatures who can only function in certain ecological niches, despite our education, despite our civilization? Or is it that, irrespective of what the context is, that we are open to learning? Irrespective of how people are speaking, irrespective of what's being offered, irrespective of the condition, it's somehow that spark of wanting to observe, to look, to learn, to listen, to re examine what we've already obtained. Is that process on? And if we want that for our children, usually we go shopping. The modern metaphor is that of shopping and the departmental store and the ale, where you have N brands of everything: rice, wheat, toothpaste, everything. And our job is to go shopping. We are not looking for rice, we are looking for a certain brand of rice. We are not looking for toothpaste. Actually, we don't need toothpaste. Toothpaste is misnomer. There are multiple ways of cleaning teeth. And what the markets are selling us, we believe and we accept. So we don't know what we are looking for, and therefore we are picking from the market. And what we are picking from the market is not good enough. Therefore, we are not sure of what we want. Is my image clear or voice clear or not clear?
Yes, it's clear, Anna.
Okay, thank you. So when you're not clear, there's that famous saying, you don't stand for something, you fall for something. You don't know what you're looking for. I mean, this is a disease which I think the West has identified. They say never go shopping without a list and just quickly go buy the things on the list and come back. Because you don't go with a list, you'll end up buying a whole set of things which you don't need. And that's because somebody's selling it and they made it attractive and therefore you ended up buying it. So I think this question of not being satisfied with education, half of the problem is that one doesn't know what one wants. And maybe that's what I think should be the fundamental focus. I think this is why education as a service which can be purchased, a purchasable service, becomes a disaster. Can be put on the line. Becomes a disaster. If it's a purchasable commodity, then we put it on the shelf and say, come, press the right button, pay the right price, and then you can take the commodity. Hardly that. Education can hardly be called that. So people are dissatisfied with education. They must ask, what are they looking for? What are they wanting? Are they sure? Are they clear? Do they want a relationship of learning with their teachers and with their children? Is that what people want? So dissatisfaction with education can have many reasons. My child doesn't like the teacher's face. I find there's too little homework, too much homework. By the way, I had this episode once in the school when a whole bunch of parents came and said, look, we want to talk about maths. There were 24 parents or something like that, and we have problem with the maths teacher. One of them said too much homework, one of them said too little homework, one of them said my child feels bored in the class, one of them said my child is already ahead of the class. They all had different issues, but the only thing was that they didn't recognize it as such. They all said it had to do with maths and had to do with that teacher, and they wanted the teacher to be changed. And I had to say to them, look, each of you came to school as individual parents, bringing your child. You've suddenly formed a group. You can always talk to school and say, my child has this problem, I have this problem, I don't know what to do about this. Can you please look into it and please guide us? Instead of that, you say, maths teacher is bad, this maths is a problem, etc., etc., etc. So I think getting clear, that's also buried in Krishnamurthi's teachings. He says, get clear, sir. I mean, he's quite tough. Get clear, sir. It's one of the most terrifying things. How do you get clear? There are multiple views on anything. And Google and Yahoo will not going to help us. Or DuckDuckGo is not going to help us. There are multiple views. To ponder through it, to go into it carefully, to find out what the assumptions are for each point of view, and get clear, finally get clear. What am I looking for in educating my child? What am I looking for? This question has got highly intensified now. I mean, to pick up what Yuvan asked, and I think maybe I pick up some of the other questions, it got highly intensified. I used to say, I mean, earlier, with my knowledge as a of physics, I used to say protons and neutrons will be required only when electrons can't do the job. I mean, we can talk like this. You don't need protons and neutrons. We don't need to be physically proximate. Well, if I were to have some coffee, you can't smell my coffee. That you can't do. But otherwise, you can listen. I can listen to you if you were to speak. That's available. And the corona has flipped a switch. It's flipped a switch and it's like, shutting down one kind of processes, the proximate processes all over the world. It's not just like, electricity is shut down in one part of America or something like that, which if it happens for 3 minutes, it's a catastrophe. It's flipped the switch for the last 2 months. No schools, people distancing each other. So whenever big switches are flipped, big switches, which affect everybody, they point to the essentials. What are we looking for in education? What do we really want for our children? Forget the ritual of going to school every day. These 2 months have proved that something called education, learning about subjects, etc., can happen sitting at home in the comfort of the air-conditioned room or in the comfort of the bedroom. One can learn. One is getting exercises, one is getting corrections, one is having interactions with teachers, one is having one-on-one, one is having one-on-many. But yes, we are missing many things also. That's true. So, what is essential and central in education? Is it knowledge? Is it information? Krishnamurthi said this in our schools once when he was speaking to teachers. He said, our schools have nothing whatsoever to do with knowledge. I heard this from Mark Lee. He even published this in his book. And everybody was flabbergasted, saying, what is this man saying? So, if information is not the fundamental, then what is the fundamental? So we need to inquire into this. We can talk about this, sure.
Yeah, there's a question related to that, like about what is fundamental to learning. And it asks, they've asked your perception of space as a part of learning. So a lot of the Krishnamurti schools are filled with nature and greenery, and that definitely plays an important role in the way knowledge and wisdom is processed. But does that mean we can't learn in a similar manner, say, in a concrete jungle?
Particularly with the corona, the luxury of space has become evident to everybody. Space is a luxury. Krishnamurti was very far-sighted when he said that schools must have space. They must be small. But more than space, he talked about schools being small. You can't have economy of scale kind of packing everybody like sardines in a small space and yet expect space. Now, I'd like to say a little bit and connect it to one of the questions about memory that somebody has asked. And I'd like to talk about education in India before the British came. I'd like to talk a little bit about this because it is a history about which most of us don't know. And I was extremely fortunate that I had an association with a small group in Chennai called the People's Patriotic PPST for Science and Technology, People's Patriotic Science and Technology Group. Very interesting individuals, people from all walks of life. There was Srinivas, there was Junjunwala, Mukundan, and there was Balu. And we would meet occasionally, and Mr. Dharampal would come, and we would have some conversations. And one of the most fascinating conversations I found that he had was about education in India before the British came. He published a book. And you found that in India there was education happening, which was vastly superior to what, if I may say, is happening today, and which was happening in England at that time. And this was because the schools were small. There were 100,000 schools in the Madras Presidency, in the Calcutta Presidency. Small schools, around one teacher, sometimes maybe two, 10 people, 20 people. That was the size of the school. And that is when I homed in on the whole idea of multi-age. I realized that it would have only been multi-age classes. They would not have had age-wise segregation. That's an industrial revolution aberration in education. Sorry to use a strong word. I hope you don't mind. You can question it. You can say nonsense what you're saying. I don't mind it. But in my mind, it's very clearly an aberration because it's only 150 years. For thousands of years, we have had only multi-age environment. Then suddenly one fine day you wake up and you draw verticals and horizontals and say, yeah, this is how schools should run. This is how age-wise segregated people must, coexist, and that is the best system for learning. I mean, where's the evidence to say that this is fantastic and this has produced the most wonderful people? The human spirit is indomitable. It can't be put into any structure. It's very difficult to contain the human spirit in structure. And human spirit, wherever there is that fantastic energy, it shines despite structure. It doesn't shine because of the structure. The question is, can we have structures
It's
which will
18
support it?
hours.
Can we have structures which will support the human spirit in its fantastic exploration, discovery? So that's the big question. And that in the schools in the ancient times, the small size of school, 10, 15, 20, 25 people, and you would have space. So the luxury of space in a large place, I mean, you would have orchards around villages, you would have fields around villages, you would have spaces where children played. So space, ability to see the sky, and there was a rhythm to life, which was part of the culture. People woke up early. People went to sleep a little after sundown, had their meals before sundown if they could. There was a certain rhythm to life which was connected to the natural cycles of life. I mean, you did not have these mega cities which are creating today havoc because there is no distance. You have huddled people all together. And then we are finding that that's become a crisis because we become a risk to each other. What tragedy. So I think this question of space, I think what you're asking, Mira, is about how do we move ahead? If I were to re-articulate what you're asking, what you're saying, how would we, given now this recent crisis of corona, given the fact that space is a privilege, given the fact of where society is today, what would be an intelligent structure? How can good atmospheres of learning be created for the young? I'm not saying schools, they can become schools, but how can the good atmosphere be created? Here again, I'm going to kind of quote a Krishnamurthi story. There's this teacher who had worked many years in Brockwood Park. Her name is Giselle Ballis, and she has been holding the Sanan gatherings in Switzerland for, I think, more than 2 decades now. And there were people, I mean, the Krishnamurti's schools were well known even in those days, and people wanted Krishnamurti schools in various countries. So some people in Switzerland were ready to sponsor the place, buy land, and create that kind of a school. And people told Giselle, you go and tell Krishnamurti that, look, I'm ready to start the school. There are people to support me, and I'm ready to do this. We can have a school in Switzerland. So Giselle, in all innocence and honesty, went and spoke to Krishnamurti and said, sir, this is what they say, and I'm ready. I think we can have a Krishnamurti school. Krishnamurti said, Giselle, if you did not have money backing you, would you still start a school? And she said, no, sir. Then he said, don't do it. So this is another, this is a huge problem. We can't think of anything without thinking of money. He said, if you have the feeling for it, start a small school in your backyard. Teach a few children. If you have the feeling for it. And the Krishnamurti's greatest legacy in the 20th century for all our schools is that they are small size schools. He said they should never be big. He said to make money out of education is immoral. They are operating from a very different space. So I would say the right education of children, you don't need the age-wise structured schools. I'm sorry, this may be a spanner in the works, but I have to speak my honest truth to you. I think you need people who are willing to engage in this question. Small schools who are not going to feel that just because there are 8, 10, 20 people together, that this is somehow a very deprived community, this is a shortchanged community, and looking over their shoulder at the monoliths and feeling, hamstrung or feeling deprived. I think to have the right kind of school, you need enough relationship. There is relationship in society. Small schools means parents would be involved, the teachers would be involved, they would be discussing what has to be done, the teacher would have enough autonomy. And as far as material is concerned, every piece of material that you want is available on the internet today. Some will say, no, there are proprietary things. Okay, fine. So, if we want a different quality of education, I think we have to start first. I think we have to question the fundamentals. We have to recognize that certain kinds of things are simply not happening in these schools. That thought is put together, that society has had, and society has created over the last 2 centuries. They are simply not working. They're destroying the human spirit. They want you to fit into work life, which the ground is shifted, Corona is shifted. The ground. Are they preparing our mind for an attitude of flexibility? Are they teaching us to question deeply? Are they creating that space where you can ask fundamental questions about life? Are schools saying to children that look, you don't need too much, you need very little for your life. But what you can't do without is your spirit and the discovery. What questions do you want to answer for yourself? What discovery, what voyage of discovery do you want? Which you would undertake irrespective of whether anybody patted you on the back or gave you $1 million or did not even look at you. You know, Rukmani Devi at the age of 27 started dancing. She had never danced. She just watched Anna Pavlova and she said, I want to dance. And she did whatever. There was no guarantee that she was going to be a great dancer. It just happened. The great musicians who passion was music, they were immersed in music. They did it because that is what they did. They undertook that journey. They did not know they were going to become famous. You know, I was very fortunate to have known Mr. M.D. Ramanathan. He lived on the same campus where I was when I was in the campus of the Besant Theosophical School. He was just living opposite. Many days I would see the bus would come and park on the main road. And one would wonder why the bus parked there, bus coming back from Kalakshetra. It was because M.D. Ramanathan was singing his song in the bus. And he would not get off the bus just because the stop had come. He would continue singing. He was a professor of music. So, and that was the last stop. So the bus would wait till he finished his song and he chose to get off. I mean, it is difficult to imagine this kind of abandon and this kind of passion and this kind of risking anything, any opinion that anybody can have. But he sang his song. So does education help the young sing their song, find the voice, dance their dance? I would be concerned with this.
So about working, how do we learn to say work as a community together and be able to balance each other's inabilities through education and what we learn in schools?
I can share a little bit about what I have learned in this process in working in 2 schools and the third school also, Sahyadri as well. I can share a little bit from my journey. If some of it is relevant, you can pick on it. I think the fundamental is that the other person is like yourself. If we are able to catch that edge, then maybe there is something that you don't think, start with the assumption that you know better than the others. And Krishnamurthi schools are again very special because Krishnamurti spoke about a completely denied psychological authority. I mean, you may have some functional authority because you need functional authority. Somebody has to take certain decisions, move certain things. It is not by bread alone that people, work together. There's a certain deeper sense of something catches in the air, in the atmosphere that draws people to work together. Something that makes people feel happy about being together. And I think there are some processes which one can follow. For instance, I think honest conversations are very, very important. And people shy away from this very often because I think we are afraid we don't know how to converse. And the Cuckoo conversational aspects is very, very critical. I think to be able to listen to each point of view and to separate the. I mean, there is. I mean, of course, in any organization or in working together, you have a purpose. So, how do you talk through a purpose? The people express their views. You consider, you listen to the views very carefully. You raise questions. And I think to have space for discussion, questioning, for moving ahead is very critical. And I mean, it's possible to say, I don't agree with you, but I mean, to yet have a completely respectful conversation. Nobody expects, I think if we expect acceptance from everybody with whom we speak, then we have a problem. And I think to stifle the human spirit would be the worst thing that you can do um, for a journey of working together. In working together, you will find somebody will say something which you don't like, somebody will say something in a manner which you don't approve. But that doesn't mean that I can't work with this person. It doesn't mean I reject this human being. Who am I to accept or reject? I can listen. And functionally, at a certain time, you may find that there may be other points of disagreement or whatever, or points of completely radically different perceptions when people may have to part company. But that's not the regular day to day. In the day to day, is there complete space, a space for being oneself, a space for one to say, I made a mistake today. I'm sorry, I could not do this, and not feel that you will be crucified. I mean, one can make big mistakes, but big mistakes are rare. Do we dare tell people, as I mean, as the head of a school, I can say, as person, somebody who's been the head of a school, go ahead, try something different, think through it, carefully work it out, and try it out. But don't hide the failures. If you find there are problems, come back, let's discuss, let's talk, let's move ahead sensibly. Go ahead. You can't make big mistakes, but you can make the small ones. In fact, there's no way of moving ahead without making a small mistake.
So, amongst the many years as a teacher, do you see a change in both children's and teachers' attitudes towards learning itself?
You see, there was an inversion of realities. Teaching, learning meant you had one teacher and you had multiple students. It was a pyramid, top down pyramid. The pyramid started standing on its head as the century flipped. With the internet, information became available from multiple sources to the individual. The individual came of age. It happened in marketing also. It happened with goods and marketing. It happened across other platforms. So there was an inversion. So instead of one teacher teaching multiple people, there were multiple teachers, multiple resources available to each individual, which is what we are all discovering now. We are all discovering this. And as a result, there has to be a change in the role of the teacher and the student. The traditional role in a traditional school of passing on knowledge is not the role anymore. So, what could be the difference? I don't know if you remember with the mixed age group in the middle school that we created, it was completely process oriented. Children could read, therefore, children can access material. The adult could provide some material, children could access the material. The adult had to help children talk to each other, learn from each other's perspectives, build stamina for seeing multiple perspectives in play. Now, this is very critical. We have gone the opposite way in education. The present system of education is disastrous because it still values the single right answer. We can talk about multiple histories, we can talk about multiple right answers, but we still value single right answers. And therefore, we don't know how to exist with people who may think slightly differently from us. without saying, I'll cut off your head or you cut off my head. I mean, this is a horrible situation. We become highly intolerant. Education has not built tolerance. Tolerance is not a good word, but it has not built robustness to engage with different views. And I think this robustness is vital. If I don't know how to be if I don't know how to affectionately relate to somebody who thinks differently, I actually mean it doesn't mean I don't know how to relate to my child. I don't know how to relate to my spouse. I don't know how to relate to my students. For heaven's sake, they will certainly have different views. So where's the space for that? So attitude. I mean, John Holt says you learn to play the cello by playing the cello. Only by collaboration you learn collaboration. Only through meeting the challenge of multiple views do you, and the challenge of relating respectfully with multiple views, do you learn the art of navigating multiple views. And it's an alive thing. It's a day-to-day thing. It's not only in the classroom. So this is, I mean, the kind of, I mean, I feel very sorry when I see the kind of dialogue or the kind of exchanges, which can't call it a dialogue, sorry, that I see happening in various social media platforms. I mean, people are looking at thumbs up and thumbs down, and people are saying obnoxious things to each other. I mean, there is no way of, but of course, there are other views also. There are sensible views also. But they are buried in this. It has become legitimate to throw things at people. And I think it's a product of bad education. But education doesn't happen only in school. Education, society educates through its style of functioning, through what it tolerates, what it values. Society educates the young far more strongly. In fact, schools like ours have often to work against the tide of our times.
What was the first day as the principal of the school like?
Oh my God. Okay, I remember that very well because I mean, it was a wonderful day for me. I came to school, Padmaji was there, she received me, she took me to the room next to the office, the room later on which she occupied. And she sat me down, took me on a little tour of the school, chatted with me. It was so beautiful. And I did not know what it meant to be a principal of a Krishnamurthi school. And I certainly did not feel responsible. I knew there were difficulties, there were problems of various kinds, but I was not responsible for them. So it was a marvelous period. You see, there were difficulties, and I was there, and I did not understand what Krishnamurthi education was fully. I mean, fully I don't know, but I did not have a deeper understanding. I knew what the problems were. I had read the teachings, but how exactly do the teachings flow into the school's daily life? I had no clue about, and I had to figure that out and learn. So my first 4 years I spent, I think, learning very carefully and listening to a lot of people and understanding. And I changed only one thing in the first few years, and that was everybody must attend assembly. That was the only major decision I took. Even that was a problem, but anyway. But the first few days were marvelous days. But after a few months, 6 months, all that wonderful happiness of not feeling responsible for the mess went away because I had to say there were difficulties when I came and I was not responsible for the difficulties. After I have joined, then those difficulties continue. And now I cannot say I'm not responsible. I have not been able to do anything about these difficulties. So I had to own up my location as person who had also not been able to make any change, not able to solve some of these problems. And then the subsequent journey was to learn because I mean one knows through this environment. I mean I had a passion for the environment for a very long time in the 70s with friends, with members of my family. We had started a small trust called Aranyam, which means forest. And we had tried to do various programs, and we are trying to understand that environment. And we understood that environmental problems are not easy to solve. You can't solve them with the stroke of one brush of the hand. We learned that if you often when you take create do one thing which you think is a solution, it has other consequences. So it's the same thing in a school. If you think you've got a problem and it's a very easy thing to solve, you make one decision, you find you create three other problems. So not to go into that, this is very debilitating for a school. So one of the early things I learned was we could not afford to fail as a school. As an individual, I can make mistakes, I can fail. But as a school, when we make a decision, when we try to take a step ahead, we can't afford to fail. There's too much at stake. You can't take one step forward and then two steps back and then again one step forward and three steps back. You can't do that. So you have to become surer and clearer about why you're doing something. And you have to be able to take that stand from after considering a lot of, and this is where the wisdom of the house is so important. You really listen to everybody because you don't know who's going to come up with gems of wisdom because you don't know yourself. So that was a fantastic learning opportunity for me. It is almost privileged, I feel, for that. So one could learn about the nuances. If you wanted to change the bell timings, there were many multiple things involved. If you wanted to restructure the assembly, multiple things were involved. If you wanted to change the kind of meetings that we had with parents, many things had to be considered. And slowly, slowly, we learned how to put our heads together and make good collective decisions. And decisions we were willing to stand by. And this is very vital. Institutional decisions which are willing to stand by. When we moved into junior mixed age group in 99 and 2000, around that time, we didn't know how many parents would support this, how many parents would feel that no, mixed age group is not the right way to go. We want to pull out our children. So we actually worked our budgets saying we will be ready for a 50% drop in numbers in junior school. And of course, we had a great blessing. Not one parent left. There was an enormous sense of trust. And we could bring about a very big structural change with full collaboration from parents, from all the colleagues, from the members of our board, from the foundation. It was a very major thing. After all, the mixed age group had been tried and tested in Montessori schools for so long. It has also been tried in Rishi Valley Rural School. It has been trusted in Vikasana in Bangalore. In multiple places it existed. So that was a very, very big change that we could bring about. And it was possible to do this in this manner. So valuing every voice was something that I learned very early. And this was because I did not know. And I think that's a wonderful position. Not knowing makes you open to listening to multiple things. Thinking you know shuts you down. So those were my first days. I don't know if I didn't answer the question about my first day because I don't have many greater memory of that than Padmaji and that room and the graciousness with which she welcomed me to school. I don't have a larger memory than that at the moment.
Wow, okay. If you were to meet Krishnamurti now, what would you ask him?
I would say thank you, sir, for the blessing of having provided me education in one of those schools or three of those schools.
Hmm. So you spoke about the involvement of parents also in supporting a decision or asking questions. I have a question from a parent of a Krishnamurti school.
Yeah.
I'll just read it out. I'm from a conventional middle class Orthodox family, and my son has joined into a Krishnamurti school. As parents, though we are trying to understand the idea of freedom, we're not able to comprehend with the kind of questions that he brings to the table. We're not matured enough to accept the freedom of thought that he has. Please do advise us on this.
That's a good position. If you say you don't understand, that's a good position. But when you read Krishnamurti a little bit, and you try to see the atmosphere of our schools, you will find that something there draws you in. If you know, our schools are very successful. Krishnamurti schools are very well known now. They are very well recognized. So, uh, what is it that draws you to the school is something that you must think about a little bit as a parent. Is it the space, the privilege of space, or is it the fact that something about this place seems attractive in ways which you can't place your finger on? Or is it because you think that if the children go to Krishnamurti school, they will be successful, therefore this is a good thing to put them there even if I don't understand? But there are several problems in this area, I can tell you that. See, one problem is very early in Paathshaala, I was discussing with children about their going home. And I came to know that some of the children were beaten at home. And I said, Ajay, I'm going to write to your parents. They can't beat you. They put you in a school where we don't talk to you in an ugly manner. You're not punished. You're not beaten. So this can't happen at home because it will create fear. Fear can bring about compliance, you see. Now, as a parent, are you sure you want to put aside fear for your child? Are you sure you will give up this beating of your child, gaining compliance through fear and authority and power? If you can't, please don't put your child in a Krishnamurti school. You are inviting conflict upon yourself. If you say you can't understand this, I think you should understand this. Traditional orthodox families can sometimes be quite brutal. And when I say brutal, I don't mean in any other way other than it is understood that the young must obey the old. In the Krishnamurti school, we don't teach that, sir. Or madam, whoever has asked this question. We don't teach that. We say, please question everything. That's what this man said. Find out for yourself. And our role as adults is to support the questioning of the child, not to provide the answers. And not also to at the same time support the child in whatever his desires are. Freedom doesn't mean fulfill your desire whichever way you want. So, if we are clear about this, because Krishnamurti school, he took a decision very early. No reward, no punishment, no fear as motivation. Can you agree on this? Do you think education can happen like this? No reward means no prizes, no stars, no special commendation, no going up for some award or the other. No punishment means no condemning the person, no ridiculing the child, no saying the neighbor is better than you, no punishing in other means. Are we ready for that? Because once it's, I mean, Krishnamurti education, like he says, all the tools that you use till now, you put your tie your hands. He says, now come on, let's see if you can do the right kind of education with this child. This child is tomorrow. This child is here. The child is as conditioned as you are. Let's see if you can give a different turn to this. What a question. What a challenge. You really want to enter that? Welcome. You will learn. You will struggle. But you may offer your child something so special that will be valuable to the child in the process. But be clear about this. Don't look for accomplishment. When parents would come in the school for the 11th standard admission, and now also in Paathshaala, they would often say, I want my child to go to IIT, I want my child to go to JIPMER or some other prestigious college. And I would tell parents, look, I'm not concerned with all that. No child should think of suicide. No child should feel that world is too poor in opportunities. No child should feel that he or she doesn't have a dignified space. These are my fundamental concerns. What marks the child gets, what college the child goes to, I really don't know. And frankly, it doesn't make a difference to me. My role is to see this child to the
It's 1830.
gates of, to the threshold of adulthood, feeling whole, feeling as a human being who is worthy of value. What the child does, what the child does not do, what the child manages to, how much money the child manages to earn, will the child get into a premier college? Not my concern. So this, I would say, I mean, do you really want education? Krishnamurti is also very, in one place he says, what's wrong with being poor, sir? If somebody is pursuing a passion in music or something else, there's no guarantee the person is going to make money. Or money which we call money. I mean, everybody earns some money, everybody earns something, everybody keeps body and soul together. If India, one thing we can learn from, there are 100, so many different levels at which we can carve out our existence. People like us who are in this conversation, people who are reasonably well off, who don't belong to the migrant labor community, who don't have to walk 100 kilometers or 1,000 kilometers to get home because they've suddenly been, everything has been cut off. We are reasonably secure. We are not in that terrible a status, but we want to become better. We want more money. We want more status. We want more power. I think we must go back to Krishnamurti again when he said, if 5 children can turn their back on money and power, 5 people can turn their back on money and power, you have done your job. So the understanding of what is the purpose of education, what is the purpose of life, how should the human spirit move through this opportunity of a lifetime, is something rather special and unique that he has offered to this world. So I don't know, sir, if I've answered your question, sir or madam. But if there's anything you want to ask after, you're welcome to do that also.
So the idea of like an alternative school or an alternative education is linked to a sense of privilege. So do you think it's unfortunately or not, is it accessible only to the privileged few, both economically and intellectually? And how can we break away from that?
This is a big question, Amira, because see, when we have a system and education has been made compulsory, and education and schooling has been made compulsory. Children can be failed after class 3. If they said education is an experience, go through it. At the end of it, write some silly exam and do whatever you have to do, it would be different. Over structuring education has been part of the problem, and education has become a means to an end. And that, I think, is a very serious problem. And the end is not nourishment of the spirit of the child. I'm sorry to say that economics has swamped education. And India has also signatory to GATT. We have signed it in. And we have, I mean, it's like plugging into the global system of education and what people call education. And I think we are, this is not going to be education. In fact, post Corona, we are going to see very quickly, I think, that people who can manage, the number of people who will be required on any shop floor physically present will be greatly diminished. The people who will have very special skills will be in demand, and they will not be working. Time magazine years ago said that people will be telecommuting, they'll be working in multiple establishments, they'll be part of multiple teams. This is already happening in many organizations. And with this physical anchoring, I think having lost its significance as the only modality, I think a lot is going to change. Who could have said all the aeroplanes don't need to fly for 2 months and we'll all survive? I think the world has been better. I think the ozone layer got healed also. Nobody could have stopped the aeroplanes. But they have been stopped now and they're starting now. And already we find that some passenger from Chennai to Coimbatore, there was the corona and 100 people are grounded now. I mean, this is a game changer. So I would say, to answer your question, the system as we knew it, is going to undergo a big change. How this system will change, we don't know. I think people are still looking in the rearview mirror. People are still wanting to recreate the world which they left behind. And if you ask me, that's one of the tragedies. For instance, a classroom which had 40 children can no longer have 40 children with social distancing. The way the buses were traveling cannot travel the same way. And even if the buses can be all right, what will you do about the crowd outside the bus stand, outside the bus? What will we do about? I think there are so many questions to be answered. And this is fear, anxiety, and realism all are mixed into this. So the ground is shifting, and the kind of education that we had, if you want to talk with a reference to that, yes, I think the small school educational model has been available to people who wanted it. It was available in communities where you had huge distances, remote communities on top of mountains or in forests. They had good education. I think they had alternate education because they were small schools. They were multi-age schools. There were one or two teachers, and teachers those were teachers who wanted to be there because nobody wanted to be in those remote places. And in those places, you did have a beautiful quality of education you have had in India today also. Whether it is recognizable as good education by the forces that be, by the number of people who got into any of these privileged institutions, we don't know. I can't answer that question. But I think they had good education. The, the tragedy of the marketplace, if I may say that, is that people who couldn't afford it went and paid money in schools, capitation fee to put their children in some English medium school, to wear the uniform, to wear the ties, to wear the shoes, because the trappings of education went by the name of education. And I think we are all responsible for having created this tragedy. And when I say we are all, I mean, don't mistake me as blaming anybody. I'm saying societal movement has created this. It's like a trend that has been created. Yes, and uh, many people have been saying that only a big upheaval can change the system. The upheaval is here. The system is going to change.
Do you think there's a connecting thread between Krishnamurti and Gandhi?
At one level, possibly yes, but at another level, I would also say no. Because if you look at uh, austerity and simplicity, you may think that they are very similar. If you think there was a quality of selflessness in Krishnamurti's teachings, but Krishnamurti was always inviting people to inquire for themselves. He said, I'm not your teacher, I'm not your leader, I'm not going to give you answers. Whereas I think Gandhi did attempt to kind of lead people and to change their mind. He did attempt to do that. He didn't leave the responsibility of the individual with the individual, which Krishnamurti left. Krishnamurti was quite honest and brutally honest in saying, I mean, if you only you can change your consciousness, and if you don't, you lead your shoddy lives, shoddy little lives. He used very strong words. So he did not, and he said he was only concerned with setting man unconditionally free. He was setting man, he would discuss as equals. And there is another level at which we find that there is a big difference between Krishnamurti and Gandhi. And I think it is in the way they both dealt with this question of violence. Gandhi put forward the hypothesis of non-violence. Krishnamurti said there is only violence. Let's understand violence in our own natures. He didn't put the hypothesis of non-violence in front because he said understanding what is transforms what is. And to posit the opposite, to state the opposite, and then try to work towards it is also a thought and an idea. So these, in very simple terms, I can say are some differences. And I think and Gandhi was a very, very influential figure who had many things which were very remarkable. His discovery of the Takli as a participatory binding thread that could unite a whole diverse civilization was quite remarkable as a strategist. He was a remarkable strategist. and but I would not compare them on the religious or another base. I would look at each one of them as distinct. There's a very interesting question I see here, Mira. Did you ever deal with people who lost focus on studies?
Yes.
Yes, I dealt with several children. Children, in fact, their main job in school is to lose focus on studies. That's the main job. And yes, and I mean, Thich Nhat Hanh said, the flower is only made of non-flower things. And uh, my wife Sumitra, who was also a teacher for many years and now is principal at Paathshaala, she has converted this and she says that academics is only made of non-academic things. So it is by attending to the field of the non-academic that the academics gets handled, that academics gets finds its place. So I had a very wonderful student once. I've had many students, very wonderful student. But this wonderful student was remarkable because she came in as a person who was doing very well in academics in grade 11. And then within a year, she was so happy in the school, engaging with everything, multiple things. She completely lost focus on academics. She was not studying and she was getting single digit marks. And everybody was very concerned. This is a bright girl who came into 11 and 12 and suddenly she's collapsing like this. What is our responsibility? So I had a discussion with her and I said to her that, look, going to class is not helping you. She said, yes, Sana, it's not helping. Then I said, don't go to class. If class is not helping you to doing academic, then don't go to class. And she, after some time discussion with me, she agreed. So she would spend her time sitting under a nice, beautiful neem tree, what we call the neem circle. And she would sit there and I said, whenever you need to go to class, you need my permission. To go outside the class, you don't need my permission. You study when you feel like studying. I told her the famous story of Tansen and Swami Haridas, that Swami Haridas would sing only when he felt like and where he felt like. And Tansen, unfortunately, had to sing where Akbar wanted him to sing and when he wanted him to sing. So I said, you be the Swami Haridas, we'll call it the Swami Haridas program. You study when you feel. And this girl started studying. I think this overstructuring possibly was a barrier, given her own psychological makeup and given the enjoyment that she was having of social company and social, that she could not find her focus. But she did find her focus. And the parents were very supportive. She was very honest and very open. And we had a wonderful relationship. And she did extremely well. She passed. She went to study in somewhere near Delhi, and I don't know what she's doing now. I have not bothered to pursue my alumni or people who were alumni of the school where I work to find out what they are doing and how they are. I know setting man unconditionally free also means, in my book, that you don't tie your children even with silken strings. In fact, the last term, it was my sacred responsibility, I took it on, was to help children cross the threshold out of school without feeling indebted, without feeling bound, without feeling they owed the teachers anything. If they came back out of a sense of affection, they would join for a cup of tea or a conversation. But they would need the space to walk free. We could not bind them in the name of affection or whatever, pragmatism, etc.
So the question right after that, in the name of education, is skill development being attempted without actually developing real skills?
I would like to again return to the metaphor of the essentials. The corona times when there are big crises, the essentials are the ones that get focused on. So, what are the essentials? And I tell you, we face this problem. I can share with you my understanding. You're welcome to agree, disagree, tear it to bits, do whatever you wish with. See, when we had to, when the land for Paathshaala was bought, and as principal of the school, and it was, we had made the proposal, Jayashri and I had made the proposal to the foundation, and we had to kind of rethink what the school was. Who knew what the school of the 21st century was going to be like? I had read enough, figured out many things. And as we were thinking through it, we found that some things had to change. The environmental priorities had to change. 21st century school had to have a greater environmental sanctity, greater environmental rootedness. Then, what would the processes be in the school? How would the life of the child who is residing in school blend with the work of academics and non-academics? And we found that relationship was at the heart of things. So the school is a place of relationship. Now, we stumbled upon the Dunbar's number. When you had to choose a number, what could be the number of children we should have in the school? You could have 20, like Dharampal described schools of ancient India. Or you could have 60, like in Brockwood Park, or CFL, Centre for Learning in Bangalore. Or we could have 240 as was in Sahyadri, or 350 as in the other school. So, what was the logic with which we could choose a number? And we came across this Dunbar's number in Malcolm Gladwell's book, Tipping Point, and I was very fascinated with it. I did some more research on that and found that 150 was a magic number. Everybody would know everybody. Everybody could relate to everybody. And therefore, if we had the right norm, there would be multiple. I mean, now I'm speaking from experience of the last 10 years. That when you see a community growing into 150, and every day, and you have a multi-age environment, there are multiple reflections about who they are from the environment. Even in a big school, the paradox of a big school is that you will still have, you have 5,000 children in a school, and I have interviewed many children. You find that they'll have 10 friends with whom they talk every day. So the fact that you have 5,000 children, you don't have 5,000 resources. You have the number of teachers who teach you and a few people who you interact with. That's it. Whereas in Paathshaala, everybody knows everybody. Everybody knows everybody's name. Everybody sits with everybody at dining table. Non-teaching staff from the village with their community, with their background, with their culture, with their difficulties, with their deep strengths and forbearance. All this is a resource for the children and for each one of us. And children are not just children who have to be taught. In fact, they are learner educators. Paathshaala recognizes that everybody is a contributor. One of the most damning things in education has been not to recognize that the young have a value. They contribute to the environment just by just being who they are, by just asking questions, by just doing some things which nobody has asked them to do, by taking initiative. They are contributors to the environment. And this is extremely valuable. And we also realize that the adults are not going to be people who already know everything. Adults have to enter the journey of being teachers by being educator learners. They have to be in a journey of learning. So these were the fundamentals. And we got rid of a lot of furniture by just having round tables. Everybody sits on the floor. Floor is a great equalizer. Some of you may have heard some of these statements in earlier videos or somewhere, so please excuse me if I'm repeating myself. But these are the fundamentals. You lead a simple life close to the earth. You understand that you are a learner. You understand you are also a contributor for others' learning. An educator, being an educator does not mean you teach. That's a big difference. Krishnamurthi, see, one of the things I would say is that teaching is finished in the 21st century. It's the age of learning, it's not the age of teaching. So being in teaching, being in learning is a journey the young and the old can take together. Doesn't matter if you're a parent, doesn't matter if you're an educator, learner at Paathshaala, or you're a teacher somewhere, or you happen to be a high-tech wizard who's on a big in a big organization. We are all learners, and if we don't learn, we'll perish. And without sounding alarmist, I will say learning is the main work in the 21st century. So, how to be in a journey of learning as equals, not seeking advantage over others, but recognizing that the fate of all humanity is knit together, not dividing humanity into the privileged and the underprivileged. The greatest loss for us with Corona is going to be that all of us used to sit together at the round tables in Paathshaala and eat. Now we can't do that. teaching staff, non-teaching staff, children, all of us, five, six of us would be at any table and we would eat together. Any visitor would join us. We can't do this now. I don't know what we are going to do in the future. We'll have to find some ways of preserving this sense that it doesn't matter where you come from. We are all part of the same human fabric, whether we are privileged or we don't have the privileges. So I would say these are the fundamentals, Mira. For a shifted education, we would need new fundamentals. And these are the fundamentals we have discovered. Um, um, Krishnamurti says, um, something about practice. He says, intention, uh, and it'll come back. But anyway, practice, you have to, by practice and through clarity, you develop capacity. If you have the intention to learn something, you can learn it. You don't have to do some skill development as if somebody is a machine and you have to program that person to doing something. I think it's a horrible thing to treat people like unintelligent human beings. I have learned that young people, 5-year-old, 10-year-old, can be repositories of great wisdom. They can articulate it in their own words. I have learned that village women, simple women who have not even been educated in schools, can from their lives speak very deep truths if one is able to listen to them and talk to them. The human condition doesn't mean that one is educated only by going to school and college. And creating an opportunity for engaging with each other, for learning from each other, I think one gets rightly educated. And if one's fundamental is clear, that I am not superior to another human being, and I really can listen to any human being and work with any other human being. I can put my hands in the soil, I can work with a machine, I can read, I can write. I think sky's the limit. One can do anything. And if one has also learned not to claim extra credit for oneself, then one has learned a great deal. One is walking the road to a happy life, an inclusive life, a life where we are not accepting the brutal traditions of the past.
So there's a question about can you speak a little bit about the role of intuition in learning, both intuition and emotion actually, in children's behavior?
It's very difficult to separate intuition from desire. If I tell you that at the moment I have a feeling that I'd be better walking on the road than sitting and talking here, is it intuition or is it just desire playing itself out? And uh, so you're not meaning that obviously. You're talking about an intuitive feel for something, a sense that this is what I should be doing. Um, David Orr talks about this. He says this hunch. He says education is about helping people discover their calling. And he says calling is a risky thing. You don't know what your calling is. If somebody starts picking up a violin and he's squeaking around with the violin, uh, you don't know whether that's their calling or not. A person will devote thousands of hours. My former student Juvan used to say that he discovered that 10,000 hours you spend on something, then you become a master. And he used to spend hundreds of hours playing his recorder. So you don't know. You'll discover if it's your calling or not as you engage in it. You discover, you enter a journey, and I think the space that you give yourself to enter the journey, that is the critical thing. Whether you become successful or not, and what makes you choose violin and not a flute, and what makes you choose the sitar and not a sarangi, who knows? There's a famous story of Alauddin Khan. Alauddin Khan was a very remarkable musician. He used to play in the Bombay, in the Calcutta, in one theatre group. He could play any instrument, stringed instrument, he could play wind instrument, he could play any of the percussion instrument. But he wanted to learn from Wazid Ali Khan, who was a great musician from the Gharana of Tansen, and he was living in Rampur. So he went to Nawab of Rampur and he said, "Look, I want to learn from this man." That man said, "This man is a very great musician. Sorry, you can't even beat him. Forget it." So he was very distraught. He didn't know what to do, and he went the mullah in the mosque. He told him, "Look, you throw yourself in front of the Nawab's car. The Nawab will ask you what to do, what you want. He will definitely call you to the court and ask you to. He himself is a great musician. He will ask you to play some instrument or sing or whatever. After that, it's up to you whether Nawab Azad Ali Khan teaches you or not. You don't know." So he went. He did exactly this. He threw himself in front of the Rolls Royce. He was a 17, 18-year-old man or 20-year-old man. I don't remember. And then there is this Nawab himself. What can you do? He's a great musician. To learn from him, you must have the credentials to learn from him. What can you do? So he says, any instrument you bring, I can play. Any notation you give me, I can play the instrument or I can sing. I can play any percussion instrument. So one after another, they keep bringing the instruments, and this young boy, 20-year-old, 21-year-old, is playing everything, singing everything. Sapat tans he's singing, all kinds of things. The Nawab was getting a little irritated. So one difficult tan he sang, and this boy said, "I can't do it." Nawab was very satisfied. He said, "Finally, I'll make you a disciple of this Wajid Ali Khan. You learn from him." Wajid Ali Khan refused to teach him anything for 2 years. He would make him wash his clothes and cook his meals, but he would not let him touch the instrument. And the instrument that he was playing was this bean, but he would not let him touch anything. Sarangi, bean, nothing. One day there was a letter from home. This young man had been married twice already, and one of his very beautiful wives had tried to commit suicide. So the postcard, which he did not know how to read, said this. Then Wajid Ali Khan said, "You never told me you were married." He said, "Sir, I did not want to leave this. This is my passion. This is the only thing I have in my life." And he said, "You go home, set everything right. I'll teach you everything I know." That is how Alauddin Khan learned how to play music in that gharana. He said, "You can play any instrument, but you cannot play the bean." And the first lesson he told him, when you play the sarangi, you play with the right hand. He said, "Switch, start learning with the left hand." For an accomplished musician who was used to the right-handed playing, to suddenly switch to the left-handed playing, that was a challenge, but that was the passion. Nothing mattered to him other than wanting. He discovered his calling. He was going to learn. He was following his hunch. He was following his intuition. God knows what he was following. And Alauddin Khan's story, what a legend. What a musician. And he was a bhakt at the Mahyar Devi's temple near Jabalpur. He used to climb up the hill every day till the age, till I think well past his 100th year. He set up the Mahyar band. So intuition is a strange thing. You can pursue it, but you can't measure it in terms of success. If Alauddin Khan, for one Alauddin Khan, you may have plenty of people who pursued their passion, but never are who are less known. So it is not knowing or is not reward, it's not recognition. That is the test of whether one has lived one's life fully and beautifully. It had to be something else. So intuition is wonderful. Pursue it. Find out if it is so. I pursued field on microscope. You saw. Was it an intuition or was it desire? Taught me some lessons, surely. But I mean, you can't look at intuition in terms of reward or in terms of accomplishment. This is my understanding.
Well, thank you so much, Anna. I think this session, in some way, for me personally, has been almost coming a full circle. But of course, I know there are many more circles to go. But
Thank you.
it really has been an eye opener. I'm sure not just for me, but everyone who attended.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity, Mira. It was a very special challenge you set for me, and that of speaking without seeing anybody's face. Well, I have done
Yeah,
whatever.
sorry about that.
Thank you. And I thank all my friends who came in for the conversation. Thank you very much for joining this conversation. Namaste.
Thanks, Anna. And thank you all. I would just like to say, tell all of you who've joined us to definitely write about the session as soon as it's done, preferably. Share it with your friends, with your family, put up on social media. It's just a way in which you can keep these beyond what you've heard or what you've seen. And you never know what it might spark many years later. And I'd also like to apologize. We weren't able to take all of the questions, but definitely, I think keep having questions is one of my biggest takeaways from this. So thank you all for joining us.